On tonight's episode of the Talkin TV podcast, we've got a double feature for you guys. We're going to be talking about the two giant new movies that dropped this past weekend, that being Raya and the Last Dragon for premium subscription on Disney Plus, and coming to America on Amazon. I'm Dom the Movie Nerd.
I am Chris the TV Nerd. I'm all sorts of messed up right now, guys.
I can tell.
But we'll get into that.
We've got a lot to talk about and more exclusively for you guys on tonight's show. I want to talk about Raya first because I watched this movie. What's it called? So it was really interesting because Disney, even though apparently the internet relentlessly made fun of their release strategy last year with Mulan, with the whole premium release strategy of paying $30 when it's going to be free a couple months later. I laughed at that and thought that was dumb and wasn't going to work. But I, once again, like I always do, clearly underestimated the love and kind of adoration and obsession, I will say, of millennial parents when it comes to Disney movies. Because, oh man, they will shell out however much money when it comes to getting that new Disney stuff. It does not matter. Like, they will go. And Raya is the latest in a line of Disney movies that have come out kind of post the Pixar merger that I would say I've been saying this like a couple times really since 2006 when Disney fully bought out Pixar and incorporated those writings out. That to me was the time period where even though we got like still some great Pixar movies that came out, that was the time period in which it really seemed like the kind of like that brilliance when it came to like the ingenious and creative story ideas and characters kind of shifted from Pixar to Disney, because in the first half of the 2010s you saw all these Disney movies coming out that even though they still exemplified like some of like the kind of the traditionalist Disney animated tropes, you were starting to see like almost like Pixar movies, but as Disney movies. Like when I like to me, the thing that I still admire about Zootopia greatly is the fact that I watched it. I'm like, this is like not a Disney movie. This is a Pixar movie, but it's a Disney animated movie. And I thought the same thing about Wreck-It Ralph, and I thought the same thing about Big Hero 6, and even Tangled to an extent, which even though that was still a kind of a traditional Disney princess musical, that still had like stuff where I'm like, whoa, this is like stuff that I would usually expect from like a Pixar movie. And they kind of got away with that in the second half of the decade. I feel like after kind of the gangbusters year that they had in 2016 with the double release of both Zootopia and Moana, they kind of got away with it. Pixar kind of made its comeback with Coco, and Disney put out two more kind of mediocre sequels, testing the waters with Wreck-It Ralph 2 and Frozen 2. But so the trailer for this came out, and this was originally going to come out last year, obviously pre the pandemic. And already off the bat, the first thing that I noticed about that trailer was like, oh my God, their animation just keeps getting better and better. Like, I've heard from people who have been in the rooms when some of the more advanced animated techniques were being applied, and this is across the board, not just with Disney, because I know DreamWorks was doing this. They did this with the most recent How to Train Your Dragon movie, and obviously we saw it with Pixar, with Soul. Just like, their animation is getting so good to the point where it really is hitting that, like, uncanny valley point of, like, is this it's starting to look realistic? So, like, can you comment on that? Only because I know that you're not as big an animated and like a Disney animated fan as I am, but like, I mean, even you've got to notice that like this shit is getting like really, really uncanny as far as how good it's getting.
Yeah, no, I noticed it with Zootopia. I think, what's funny? I'm not the biggest sort of traditional American animation fan in regards to like the kids medium, but these recent Disney films, granted I haven't seen Moana, that's on my my bucket list for sure, but Zootopia is in my top 10 favorite movies of all time. I will unapologetically say that. I love that movie, just not even, it's not even just a guilty pleasure. I love that film. Don't at me if you disagree. But I think a lot of people think it's a great film. And with Raya as well, I mean, the animation was breathtaking, man. It was the stuff of inspiration is what I wrote down in my notes. I was just sort of reviewing it as you were about to segue me in here. And it just, not only does it look stunning, not only does it feel real, but it looks so lived in. It's amazing to me how they're able to take these environments and make like the grass looks like you can water it and it will grow. I mean, like the bugs, the creatures, the way they move, their mannerisms are all just so, I can't describe it, so ethereal and so like they their animation is starting to transcend the genre and, like you said, become something special and in a league of its own. And it's actually really incredible to watch. And I think it's actually making me more of a fan of traditional children's animation. And it's crazy to say that these films aren't even Pixar films that I'm talking about.
Right.
These are just regular Disney animation. That's the part that blows my mind.
It's honestly kind of insane because because that to me was the whole thing. Like the crazy thing is like I said, the 2000s was arguably like the worst decade for Disney because I mean that was like all their underrated hits and they like maybe had like a few hits. Like Lilo and Stitch gained like a cult status later on, right? And Atlantis the Lost Empire kind of gained a cult status later on. But like you don't see people talking about Meet the Robinsons or Bolt or Chicken Little or Home on the Range or not even Princess and the Frog the way that they talk about those Disney classics like Lion King, like Aladdin, like even Tarzan. Like people know more about Tarzan than they do about any of those 2000s Disney movies, right?
Well, that Phil Collins score definitely helps.
Yeah, of course. But here's but my counterpoint to that is it didn't say Brother Bear. Brother Bear had
that is such a good point.
Score. And nobody talks about that one, like, at all. But I really feel like I started to notice it with Wreck-It Ralph, where I'm like, this is a Disney movie, but this doesn't feel like a Disney movie. And I feel like with Raya, what we've seen now is this is kind of, though I feel like the way that Soul was kind of the come full circle capitulation moment for Pixar and everything that they've been like, all the storytelling devices and tropes that they've been kind of doing since the first Toy Story. I feel like Raya, in a weird way, and I'm assuming that that's just because that's at the point where I'm at in my life right now as far as how long I've been watching this stuff. Like I've watched almost every single Disney animated movie there is throughout my childhood. And even up until now, I'm even still catching up on a few that I haven't missed. Like I just actually rewatched Fox and the Hound. That movie hits you in a way that no other Disney movie does. But Raya truly does feel like the capitulation of like, because you know what it is? It's a Disney princess movie, but it's got like a typical MacGuffin-like quest and story structure, but it's got like arguably like probably the most humanized villains, if you could even call them that. It's got like the getting the Scrappy Band together and like picking up the a new character on each destination that I honestly haven't seen in a movie in a while. It's got the typical Disney animated sidekick. It's got the typical Disney animated ending, but there is just such a richness and a texture and kind of understanding about this story and what they're doing that I'm like, like Disney has always been incredible when it comes to detail, but this kind of detail is stuff that I would really expect from a Pixar movie. And like, again, just how deep into Chinese lore and just, Asian lore in general that they went as far as like where they drew the inspiration from and the designs for all of the creatures and how I have to assume that every single one of those creatures that's in this movie is based off of either a real life animal design or or one of the many fables that came out of Asian lore. And that part in and of itself was fascinating to me, and obviously it's helped by the incredible animation, but it just to me reinforces, I guess, what it is that I love about Disney movies growing up, while at the same time kind of doing what I feel like these last couple Disney movies have been doing really well, which is incorporating a lot of the modern day kind of sensibilities into kind of these classic fabled stories. I don't think it works all the time, but when it works in instances like this, it really does craft for like some absolutely incredible movies. And to me, this is the stuff that constantly reminds me why it is that I still like Disney and I still like some of the storytelling that I've done, is that aside from the Marvel and the Star Wars BS, this is their bread and butter. And this is the reason why they have continued to dominate throughout the last almost 100 years of their existence now.
Yeah, no, I mean, for me, this is a great reminder of be hard on Disney, because they're capable of the good writing that I was preaching about on the Friday night WandaVision live stream. Like, this is it. This is your example. If you guys want to know what was Chris talking about, I mean, the writing was good. No, it wasn't. This is good writing, because here's what this story really is. And so it's actually really amazing right now, because not only am I writing a radio play that is centered around the hero's journey, this movie is the hero's journey. And I'm taking a class right now that's the hero's journey. So I'm so into this Joseph Campbell sort of zeitgeisty thing, sort of reemerging in pop culture. And so I was sort of picking this apart just subconsciously at this point. And it's the hero's journey, but all good hero's journey stories have something that makes them stand out, because it's a very easy format to write. I'm an aspiring writer. I'm not a writer yet, but I mean, I'm taking the first leap into writing with the hero's journey, because it's just the payoff can be there. But as I'm writing and as I'm sort of working on my script, I'm learning that, yeah, but here's the thing. George Lucas might have made it look really easy. Raya might have made it look really easy, but it's actually more complicated than it seems because you're introducing a new world. So one of the things that I think Raya really did well was, first of all, they didn't hearken into one sort of section of Asian culture. They kind of just made it a little more sort of vague because this isn't really our Earth. This is a different type of Earth. You know, they're trying to achieve Kamundra again, which is essentially the one dragon, the one unified nation where there's no quarrel, where there's no grief, there's nothing nasty like we have in our society. And that's very much like the social message under this film. And I actually really think it's a sweet message. I think it's a really great message to give to children. You know, look past the differences because there is one thing that connects us and combines us and molds us together, and it's our humanity. And so that's why I also think the mentor figure that she finds, right? The dragon, I forget her name, but played by Awkwafina. It's so powerful because it's taking someone that isn't a human to show her that her humanity is what ties them all together. And so that it's so silly that they're fighting. And yes, this is simple, but as we see this film unfold, you know, the way that they are able to give us this exposition, there's no fat. You know, they introduce the 5 nations in kind of like a movie trailer style way in the beginning where they have the panels come up one by one, but it's like, okay, nation, elevator pitch, 1 sentence. And then of course, Daniel Day Kim's character, I think it was, what was his name? Bo or something?
Benju, I think.
Benju, the father figure to Raya, does an amazing job of exposition without sort of making it boring and without drowning you. So this film really impressed me because like the steps here are drag and drop, copy and paste. But what they do with it is so masterful. It's like that Dan Harmon, story circle we were just talking about when we were hanging out Saturday night. It really is. So we can break that down and get more into specific. Yes, Pangea is Kumandra. But that's to me what's so beautiful about this, because you're giving kids the oldest story of all time, the hero's journey, but you're managing to weave in so many new elements and such an important social message without any of it being blatantly in your face. So
I love that you're bringing all this up because this is literally the stuff that I've been trying to tell people like since I got out of school, which is that it's like, why do you think that those old Greek fables and those old Greek stories are still fascinating to us hundreds of thousands of years later? It's because the story steps work. And because guess what? If you look at stories with structure as opposed to stories without structure, what are the ones that are going to last longer and what are the ones that people gravitate more so towards? The ones with structure. And even though the internet is trying to break down this idea that, no story works because every story has been done and they're all predictable. Nah. That's bullshit. Because if you want an example of how the oldest story structure in the world can still create for some absolutely incredible stories, then look no further than this movie, because you're right, Chris. This movie is, to a T, the hero's journey. Quite literally. This is Hero of a Thousand Faces meets hero's journey, meets all of that stuff. And I love also that you brought up the message kind of that Sisu the Dragon, voiced by Awkwafina. And again, like I probably like really transformative performance because going into this movie, like you want to talk about like the modern sensibilities that I was talking about before. That's the part specifically with what Awkwafina was doing with that character that I personally thought was going to torpedo the movie. And she ends up like actually being really cool. And like kind of, I guess, her naivete of having not been around for hundreds of years and still thinking that like human beings are great and get along with that. You think that it's going to provide a hitch for her at first, but in the end, it ends up like, again, being the thing that saves them and ends up bringing them together. Because even though Raya and what's the name of the of her rival Namari are going at each other and ripping each other's throats out in that really cool kind of enemy / frenemy type relationship. We'll get into that in a bit throughout the course of the movie. Like the kind of their shared connection that they have through Sisu and the magic and the effect that the dragons can have on the world, to me, is the stuff of this movie. And that to me is the stuff that gets back to why it is that we love Disney. Because Disney, their strength is always being able to translate these absolutely universal themes that anyone can gravitate towards in a way that can really appeal to anyone. And it really sucks because the annoying thing is that because their movies have always typically, again, been watched more and enjoyed more by kids, they have been stuck in the box that they are exclusively kids' movies. But I feel like if this particular movie proves anything, it's that these movies are anything but just kids' movies. These movies truly do appeal to everyone. And I think they've personally also been doing a much better job recently of like really incorporating some like, like there are still their fair share of silly cartoon moments, but like the serious moments of this movie and like some of the serious conversations they have, like I really enjoy, because that's the stuff that's like, yeah, even though this might not be exactly how people talk in real life, like I still need to hear this, and this still has weight, and this still like kind of matters to me, and this makes sense, you know? And like I know it's really tough because, again, not every movie can be made like this. It's impossible, but it's just so nice and refreshing when we can get a movie where the script is actually well done and the story is actually well thought out and it has detail and it has that great message and it has these great characters. See, this is what I mean when I talk about that every great movie has an underlying message, you know? I think that's kind of been conflated and confused by other people on the internet and saying that, oh, we just need to keep politics out of our entertainment and that. Like, I'm a firm believer in that, but that's not what this is here. Like, not at all.
Totally. I'm going to retort that in a second here. Really not retort that because I agree with you, but we got to shout out some people in the chat. Eastbound, Dom, I'm assuming that's one of your homies.
Yes,
and Stranger Boy as well. Stranger Boy, my friend. Thanks for hanging down. We're up to 298 subscribers as we're going live here. The momentum is high, and I want to bring it back to Sisu. Yes. Okay? Because you raised a great point about Sisu. She easily could have tanked the movie. And when I first saw her, I was very, very nervous and very scared. Not because the animation wasn't brilliant and very interesting. I actually really thought the animation was really brilliant. Not that I'm historically, versed in that type of realm, but there's traditional Shintoism where they have these street fairs to worship some of their gods, and animism, and as well as those cultures of Japan. And it kind of looked like those sort of like dragons that they would fly on the kites. Like it harkened back to that, which I thought was cool, but it was so broad where like all Asian cultures could kind of, it didn't limit itself to one, which I think is also one of the beauty of this movie, not diving too deep into one specific cultural background, because the message is about coming together as one human people. But Sisu, right? She's sort of the character that propagates that message. She's sort of the character that sees through all the bad in people and only finds the good. But she also, at first, could have been very, very annoying. She comes out and her first joke when she turns into human form is about her butt being closer to her head. And that was when I said to myself, oh, so they had to do this type of humor to appease the rating system. And that's unfortunate. And I thought it was going to be an issue throughout the film. Thank God it wasn't, because I really came out enjoying this one. But there is some lowbrow humor in this movie that I kind of think steps on its toes a little bit. And I wanted to get your take on that.
Yeah, the lowbrow humor for me, look, I will definitely admit that there have been instances where the lowbrow humor, I don't care about it, but it doesn't ruin the movie, and there have been instances where the lowbrow humor completely tanks the movie. But I can thankfully say that usually in the instances where the lowbrow humor tanks and the bad writing and the bad dialogue tanks the movie is usually an instance where the movie was already weak to begin with, right? I can say that. And this was definitely the instance where, yeah, this story was so strong and so fucking good that even the modern day sensibilities and kind of the poop jokes and the butt jokes and all that didn't bother me as much. They were certainly annoying when they started, but this story was so good that I'm like, yeah, I don't care about any of this stuff, and this is not going to drag this movie down for me. You can just tell when you get those types of special movies. You know why? Because even and I'll tell you another reason why it doesn't bother me, because even that, I think back to The Lion King, and I think back to all the jokes that Timon and Pumbaa cracked in Lion King, and I think back to all the weird Rosie O'Donnell random one-liners in Tarzan, and I think back to like what's it called? Like all of Robin Williams' random pop culture references that he cracked in Aladdin that make no sense, but you don't care because it's Robin Williams and he's a genius, in Aladdin. And so this is nothing different than Disney's been doing for years, and their stories are 9 out of 10 times, again, Chicken Little and Home on the Range notwithstanding, their stories are so good and so indelible and so endearing that those just kind of brush off, and like because I know that when I think back to this movie, I'm not going to remember that joke. I'm not going to remember any of the jokes in this movie. I'm going to remember these incredible moments, particularly near the end of the movie when it's the group trying to hold off the horde of those demon things with the remains of the gem. That's the stuff that I'm going to remember from, and them ultimately kind of doing what they do. Obviously, we'll get into spoilers in a little bit in order to stop them. That's the stuff that I'm going to remember from this movie, not any of the fucking jokes.
Yeah, no, but it was danger territory for me.
It was,
at first,
absolutely, but it managed to avoid it.
Because I think like the intro sequence is so special, and just the way that they set the stage is so brilliantly done. I mean, this movie is not only gorgeous from a visual standpoint, but from like a writing standpoint, and of course from a message standpoint that you just don't want to see them mess with that. But hey, I got over it. I wanted to get your opinion on it, and I totally see your points. Something else I was sort of thinking while watching this movie was how we've had we've had films and series that take so long to establish their world, and yet it's still confusing after multiple seasons. How does this film sort of just in out of the gates, throw you right in? You understand fully what's going on. You're comfortable. You're not confused. And of course, there's other moments throughout the course of the film where they drop exposition, but they do it so cleverly. Where you meet the character Bo, I believe his name is, the little kid whose family got taken by the sort of underworld demon-y type things that sort of turn you to stone and take your soul. He only stays on the boat because he saw that happen to his parents. And so you get that exposition through them sort of showing you how someone has adapted. And so you say, oh, okay, that's why water's important, because they hint at it, but they don't tell you until it's done in such a cinematic movie way. And yet, why does this little children's animation film have what so many other films of our day don't? That's kind of what it's blowing my mind about this.
Because it does the thing that good screenwriting and good storytelling is supposed to do, which is that nothing is put on screen without having intention. I've been watching this hour-long lecture from this professor named Carl Iglesias, and he had this brilliant thing that he said, which is where in movies you should never have a character speak unless they want something. And you should never even have a character unless they have an intention and a goal and they want something. And that to me is what so many screenwriters miss, because you're right. Because so much of the time they have to feel like they have to come up with this extra engorged plot and all of these different things to keep it going, but they forget about the one thing that, again, I'm going to sound like a broken record here, but I don't care, is the thing that drives these things, which is story. And, well, not story, which is character. You have to have well thought out characters. And as far as the whole world building aspect and how this movie basically does the equivalent of about 5 seasons worth of exposition dump within the first 2-3 minutes as far as fleshing out the origin and the history of this world, and they make it look easy. For that, I will read to you a quote that I read on our Mank podcast, which is, again, kind of a little bit of an ode to Citizen Kane, but I feel like it captures this perfectly, which is, you can't capture a man's life in 2 hours. You can only hope to get the impression of one. And that, to me, is, again, the brilliance of storytelling, which is, look, when you know someone fully and you know them inside and out, what happens? You get bored because you know everything that's going to happen. So you have no further continuing interest. That, to me, is the magic of movies and the magic of storytelling. You're not getting the full thing, because if you know again, this is to me part of the reason why the internet has ruined movies, because the internet took those conversations that you would have when you were stoned out of your mind at 1 o'clock in the morning, just talking with your buddies and having those random weird conversations about shit that nobody cared about, and made that shit public and made that shit mainstream. And now and picking apart every single little piece of every single little movie, of course that's going to make movies boring as a result, because that's not what the intention was. Movies are supposed to be there in their moment. You're supposed to get that impression. It's supposed to have that effect on you, and you're supposed to have come away thinking about, not necessarily to having had this big life revelation, but having enough of an understanding that it will at the very least impact your understanding of the world. That, to me, is what stories are, and that, to me, is what stories do. It's the fact that it's an illusion. It's a magic trick, right? You're not actually watching anything that's real. And animation is the prime example of that. Because animated movies, you're not watching real people photographed. You're just watching drawings move and hearing people voice them. And you're hearing this incredible ambiance and this incredible sound design that is layered upon layer upon layer of all these different sounds that they have in order to make these worlds feel so real. That, to me, is why we love these movies and why we keep coming back to these movies. And again, when these freaking animated movies, they keep coming out, they keep blowing these live action movies that we know of out of the water, with these incredibly subtle stories, with these characters that are so much better because they can appeal to anybody at all walks of life, because they're meant for kids primarily, but they're still designed by adults, and they make it look easy. And they make it look easy, which, again, to me, infuriates me more than anything else, because I'm like, fuck, that makes somebody like me who thinks it's so easy to do this stuff, and then I actually try to do it, and I find out how difficult and how fucking, engaging it is, and I have to rack my brain just to get a few words down on paper, and I see this shit, and I'm like, fuck, come on.
This movie,
easy.
This movie reminds me of a post-it note I'm literally looking at on my computer right now that I want to remind myself of every time I'm working on my script, my album. There's a beauty in minimalism, and simplicity. And this film has that. And sort of to expand that more to like the broader scale and maybe the future of this IP, this franchise, I don't know if I want one if
I
they
don't.
don't give it the same love and care that they gave this film, because I can see this being a huge smash hit. I mean, the reviews are already really great. It's just hard to gauge without like theater numbers and all that. It's always going to be tougher this day and age, but at least it seems like the internet's taken to this film, which I think rightfully so. But this film could be tarnished if they make like a sequel down the line and it's just half baked, because this film is like a slap in the face to Hollywood. And it's ironic because it's coming from the biggest perpetuator of Hollywood, wherein like this film has staying power for generations because it's what it's based on is the stuff that has been surviving, like we were talking about with Joseph Campbell. That's mythology that's been around for years. Iliad and Odyssey has been around for years because it's still compelling to new readers to this day, because it took the time to flesh out the narrative. Even though it's a long book, you're gonna be hard pressed to argue that there's fat in that book with any scholar or someone who's really read it, right? Because it's just so thought out and so carefully plotted. And so it gives me hope, honestly, for like the future of, big budget cinema and sort of more mainstream sort of zeitgeisty films. But these films also kind of make me sad because then they're so few and far between. But that's just how brilliant this movie is, that it makes me go to that place in my mind and sort of, comb my brain to sort of figure out the effect that this has on the medium that we love talking about and watching and being a part of so much, entertainment and film, because we watch a lot of movies, we watch a lot of TV, and it comes up sometimes, but at least to me personally, the questions that I'm asking haven't come up in this capacity in quite a while,
Yeah, look, the only thing that I'll say to your point there as to why we only get these movies few and far between is, look, let's be honest, if we got every single movie like this, they wouldn't be a special. That's the only thing that I'll have to say to that is, look, I guess in a weird way I have to thank the amount of bad schlock that we get, because at the very least it makes these types of movies even more special. And before we move on to our next movie, what's it called? The only thing that I had to say is motherfucking Rose Tico, Kelly Marie Tran, crushed it. Crushed it. This is... I mean, again, it's so tricky, and it still pisses me off that voice acting will never get the recognition that it deserves, but this was a voice performance unlike any that I've seen. And this is, again, only 3 months after we saw Jamie Foxx and the incredible job that he did in Soul. And she absolutely knocked it out. Like, there were points in this movie where I really thought that I was just, I wasn't watching an animated character. I was watching... just a real person that was Raya, and just that is all due to Kelly Marie Tran and the absolutely impeccable amount of humanity that she breathed into this character. Like, I loved the amount of kind of world wariness that she had, while still mixed with that sense of childlike idealism that she had tried so hard to bury just based off of her own childhood experiences. It was so awesome, because I think this is the first time I've ever seen a Disney character that's like embittered and jaded. And also, even though, again, I just want to give a quick shout out to this, but Disney definitely, I think, is finally starting to like understand how to do LGBTQ portrayals in film better. Because, dude, I don't know about you, but the chemistry that was brimming between Raya and Namari in this movie was, I'm like, dude, I'm like, that was some like straight up romantic tension right there between those two. And it was really fucking awesome to watch. Like, every single time those two were having a conversation, I'm like, oh man, could you imagine how awesome these two would be together? And then Namari has to go and do some dumb shit, and I'm like, ugh. And I'm like, damn you, like, latest in the long line of Prince Zuko's. You just have to keep doing this next dumb thing and keep fucking it up. Because, like, I really enjoyed her and Raya's relationship throughout. And I'm like, damn it, Disney, you couldn't do it. You couldn't give this to us just this once. You couldn't give it. It's 2021. Come on. Do you have any idea how many people would be beyond stoked if they actually did that? I hate to be that guy, but I'm like, man, when the signs are all there,
No, yeah, their chemistry was, I think, one of the things that instantly hooked me in, and that's also what made that sort of betrayal at the end of the opening sequence all the more powerful. Because you can tell that there's a little something more there, but yeah, their chemistry was just cute, man. Like I loved it, it was just so, I don't know, everything about this film was gorgeous, and their chemistry was a big factor in that. So Yeah,
I know.
I'm definitely shipping Ramari.
Yeah, the only thing that I'm going to say to that is my response to that comment, which is I'm not shipping them. Disney shipped and packaged them. I'm just waiting for Tumblr to do its thing. And I feel like that's the perfect point with which to close our discussion on Raya and the Last Dragon. But for star rating, it's not a perfect movie. I think, again, those modern day sensibilities to me really prevent this from being a perfect movie, but it is still absolutely incredible. Already one of the best movies we've gotten from 2021. Incredible animation, incredible voiceover talent, excellent storytelling. Like, if you want an example of what to do, of how to write a story and do it well, again, just look no further than most of these Disney movies. This is a 4.5 out of 5 for me.
Yeah, this film, like I said, it's just so charming. It's so endearing. We need it, honestly, at this point in time. We really do need a film that just sort of says, hey, look past the difference of your neighbor and come together, because there's really what you're fighting over might not be that much of a division as you think it is. And it's great, man. I loved every second of this film. So yeah, 4.5 stars.
Fuck yeah.
It's incredible.
Yeah, really, really good movie. Heavily recommend. Like, never in a million years do I advocate giving Disney more money than they already own, but this might be the one time where I'm like, again, I'll never advocate it, but if you're really feeling that, to drop that $30 right now instead of waiting until June when it's free, like, I'm not gonna say that you're entirely in the wrong for this one. That is all that I will say to that.